So here is a quick one-take introduction to Git. So this tutorial, I'm hoping to get you up and running with Git and GitHub as quickly as possible. First, I'm going to give a quick overview of what these things are. So what is version control, what is a commit, what is a branch, what is a repository. Then the next three phases are meant to be a little more interactive. So first we're going to make and edit a repository through the GitHub graphical user interface. Then we're going to clone that repository from GitHub onto your local computer. And we're going to learn how to use Git Status and Git Commit and Git Push and Git Pull and what the purpose of those things are. And then towards the end, so phase 1 and 2 are basically the things that you'll use most often. And then in phase 3, I'll kind of give a glimpse of some of the collaborative features of Git and GitHub. So creating issues, and then creating and merging branches. So to start off, what is Git? So Git is a version control system. Essentially, you make changes to your code or your files or anything. And then you make a commit, which is one of these circles. And what a commit is a collection of files, or more specifically the changes you've made to files, along with some commit message. So maybe here, this first commit is making a new repository, and then you make some changes to the code. Let's say like you add some new functions, and then that's when you make the second green circle, where you say, okay, added some functions, and then here are the changes. A thing that's nice about Git is you can also make branches. So that's what this blue branch and this orange branch are. So you can essentially copy the entire repository, make some changes on a different branch, and then when you're confident that those changes work or that there's something you want to add to the main code, you then can merge them back into the main branch. So this main branch is called a master branch, and then you can make many other branches. In this case, here's a your work and someone else's work branch. All right, so and there's more details here. This is a really good resource to learn more in detail about what we're talking about here. All right, so then what is GitHub? GitHub is just a place where you can put your Git repositories and where you can interact with other people's repositories. So here's a quick picture of the official Python repository. So all of Python's code is up on a repository on GitHub, and people can collaborate in improving Python. All right, so now we are going to start the interactive portion of this. So this assumes that you have a GitHub account. It also assumes that you've set up Git in your local terminal. And later in the tutorial, we're going to use SSH to communicate with GitHub. So that should be set up. And if it isn't, there's a tutorial here that you can follow. So to confirm that those things are set up, I'm going to confirm that really quick. So here's GitHub, but I really quick am going to open up a terminal. So here's a terminal. And to make sure that Git is configured as expected, I'm going to try to git config list. So you see that I've set up my user email and my username for GitHub. And then to check to make sure that I can communicate with GitHub via SSH, I can run that command. And this says, okay, I can connect via SSH. So if you don't have those things, there's links in the doc on how to get those set up. So I'm going to leave this terminal for now, and we're going to go to GitHub. So go ahead and open up GitHub and navigate to your repositories page. So that's right here. And we're going to make a new repository. So we're going to go ahead and click New to make a new one. And this is my example repository, a new GitHub repository for a tutorial. And then we're going to go ahead and click this initialize this repository with a README. I usually initialize my repositories with a README, and I recommend you do as well until well, if you're making a repository first on GitHub, you should probably initialize it. So go ahead and create this. And it'll take a minute to initialize. And let's take a minute to familiarize ourselves with this layout. So here we see the last commit that we've made is shown right here, and it shows who's made it. This right here, we said remember to initialize the repository with a README, so here is that README. We can see all of our commits here. So if we click this button, we'll see there's that first commit, and each commit has a commit hash associated with it. So this is a shortened version of that hash. Back to the main page, we see we have our files here, and we can click on the files to see what they look like. Going back, and there's a few other things here that we'll talk more about later. But the first thing we want to do here is to add some code to our new repository. So if you want to do that through the online interface, you can click Add File and Upload Files. So now you can drag and drop files in here. So I have a file here in my documents in an example directory that I want to upload. So here's my example script, and I want to upload that. So here I can give a description for this upload. So this is an example, or I can say add an example Python script. And then I can hit, I want to commit this directly onto the master branch, and I can commit these changes. So that takes a minute to upload. And now we see that file has been added to our repository. So we can click on that and see the code that's in that file. And we can click here to go back to the main page. And notice here that on this commit history, we now have 2 commits. So if you click that there, we'll see this initial commit with the README, and then this commit that we just made. But it's a little clunky sometimes to work with the interface, because you want to be able to use all of your tools that you have on your local computer to modify these scripts. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on cloning this repository onto our local computer. So just a quick introduction to what cloning is. So the idea is we were just working here on GitHub, and this says your fork, but in this case this is our repository on GitHub. And what we can do is we can clone it, which is basically making a copy of it to our local computer. And then we can make edits locally, and then in a minute we'll see how we can push those changes back to GitHub. So this is where we go ahead and open up. So I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to go ahead and open up a terminal. And this is where it comes in handy to have SSH access. So just like before, I ran this command to make sure that I'm authenticated with GitHub. So at this point, we need to do that. And what we're going to do, actually, I'll bring this over here and open up GitHub. As you'll see through the interface, there's this code button. This used to be called clone. I think they recently changed it. And we have 2 options to clone. We can either clone via HTTPS or clone via SSH. If you set up SSH like this, you can clone via SSH. And that's usually what I do, because by default, if you clone by HTTPS, you'll need to enter your username and password to GitHub every time you make a change to the repository. So I recommend SSH. And what we do is we copy this SSH URL, and then in the terminal, first we navigate to where we want to put the repository. So I'm going to navigate to Documents, and I'm going to put it in my Documents. So here I'm going to git clone, and then I'll paste that SSH URL and press enter. And now we see in my Documents directory, I have my example repository here. So I'm going to go into my example repository, and we'll see now that this has the file that I uploaded on GitHub, it has the README, and it also has this hidden folder .git, which is what stores all of the information about our Git repository. All right, so now we have this cloned. So now that we have the repository on our local computer, let's try to make some changes. So the first thing to check, I suppose, and let me zoom in a little bit here, if it'll let me zoom in. So we can see this a little better. I'll do it here towards the top of the screen. So The first thing to check in our local repository is that we have the same commits that we have online. So Git Log shows your commits. And we can see here, here's that initial commit. So on GitHub, I'll show you how this corresponds. So you see here's our initial commit, and now we see it on our local computer too. And then here is our second commit, add an example Python script. And that's right here. So we're all set. And there's another command, Git Status, that shows you whether you've made any changes locally compared to online. Right now we see we're on the master branch, and everything is up to date, and we have no changes to commit. So let's change that. Let's make some changes. So I'm going to open up my example script in Vim, and let's just make a change. So we're going to say hello world, and we're going to say with some changes. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file. And now if I run Git Status, we see that we have a modified file. And what we need to do is we need to first add these modifications to the staging area and then commit them. So that's what in the Google Doc, that's what this graph is about. So essentially I have example Python script in my working directory, and there's been changes. And I'm going to add that file to the staging area, and then I can commit those changes. So I'm going to go ahead and say git add all. And now if I run Git Status again, we'll see that this file has been staged, and now we can commit the file. And we're going to give that a message. So here we're going to say made some changes to the Python script, and then enter. Now if I run Git Status again, you'll see that our local branch is one commit ahead of the GitHub repository. So we see on the GitHub repository, if we refresh, we only have 2 commits. But if we run Git Log locally, we have 1, 2, 3 commits. So to sync things from your local repository to your remote repository, you run the command git push origin master. So one of the first questions here is what is origin and what is master? So I'll talk about that in a minute. We're going to go ahead and hit that. And you'll see now if we refresh this GitHub page, we now have that third commit. And so what origin is, that I explained in the doc a little bit, origin is just basically the URL that connects this local repository to the remote repository. So we can run this command, git config git remote, to see this is what origin is. It's connecting to this GitHub repository. And then master is just the branch. So we're on the master branch, so we're pushing to the master branch of the GitHub repository. All right. So you don't have to edit your files through your local repository. You can also do it on GitHub. So that's what we're going to do really quick. So we go to the code tab, and my internet is not working. Let's see if I can get it reconnected. 1 second. All right, I have now reconnected my internet. So let's make a change to this file here on GitHub. So if we click this little pencil file, this little pencil icon, we can make changes. And maybe we add a line to print hello from GitHub. So we can make this change. We can preview the changes to see what's changed. Now, just like before, we say add some changes from GitHub. And you can also add more description here if you want. I don't always, but adds an extra print line to say hello. And now we can commit this directly to the master branch and commit changes. And now we have the opposite problem as before. So we'll see on GitHub we have 4 commits. So we can click and see the 4 commits. But if we look locally here, I'll bring this back to the top of the screen, and Git Log, we only have 3 commits locally. So to go in the other direction, to pull information from GitHub onto our local computer, we could just delete this repository and clone again. But the shortcut way to do that is to run Git Pull origin master. So before we pushed, and this is the opposite, this is pull. So if we Git Pull, now if we look at our Git log, we'll see that we're up to date. So here's this extra print line. And if we look at example Python script, you see we're now up to date. So that's how that works. All right, so this is the basic pipeline. So essentially, most of the time when you're using GitHub on your own, you're going to have your local repository here, and you're going to make changes here. So, I'm going to define a new function, my function, and this has, an argument, and I'm going to print that argument. And I work on this on my computer, and I make sure it works. And then when I'm ready to make changes, I run Git Status to see what I've changed. And then I git add, and I can git add all to add everything I've made changes to. Or I can also add a specific file like this. So in this case, I'm going to add the specific file, and you'll see it's staged. And then we can commit, make another change, and then we push. And this is kind of the general pipeline. And we also could be working from multiple computers, or we could be working in multiple folders, so you can have multiple cloned copies of this repository. So a lot of times if you make some changes from one computer and then move to a different computer, when you're on the different computer, you'll need to Git Pull before you make any changes to make sure things are all synced up. All right, so that's the general pipeline here. And one last thing in this tutorial is the idea of issues and branches and pull requests. So let's say I'm on my repository here, and I look in the script and I see something that needs to be changed. So let's say my func actually needs to add 2 numbers instead of just printing something. So we can move to the Issues tab, and we can say, let's make a new issue. My func should add 2 numbers. Right now, all right, and we make an issue. And usually, in this case, we have a small repository and we're just working on our own. But on larger repositories, these issues are really important. So for example, here's the pandas repository. So pandas is a really popular package for Python. And we can see we have something like 3,000 issues here. We have all sorts of little bugs that are reported here. With all sorts of information about what the bug is and how they might fix it. So issues are really important for big collaborative packages, but they also can be somewhat important for your own use as well. So for example, here's a repository that I've been working on that I mostly just work on myself. But you see I have some issues on the issue tab, things that, it's just me, but things that I think need to be changed. And then once I'm done with an issue, I close the issue. So you see here in one of these issues, I can close down here. And then all of the issues that I've finished, that I've resolved, are on the closed tab. So anyway, so back to our example repository and our issue here. So let's say I want to make a new branch to fix this issue. So there's different reasons to create a new branch, and I mentioned those in the doc. But so how am I going to do that? So let's go ahead and go to the terminal, and I'm going to create a new branch. So to look at the branches I have right now, I can just say branch, and we see we just have master, and this little star means that we're on master. So now I'm going to check out a new branch. So you need this B, and then we can say fix my func. So that's the new branch. And now if I get branch, we'll see we're on that new branch. That's why there's this star here. So now I'm going to make changes locally. So let's look at my files and go into this example script. And here we can fix this function. So num1 and num2. And now we can say, let's return num1 plus num2. So here we've made these changes, and we can see in our status, notice this has changed. We're now on this new branch, and here are these changes. So just like before, I can add these files, I can commit, and say now, say my func now adds 2 numbers. We see that we've made a change, but we actually haven't pushed this branch on to GitHub yet. So we see GitHub only has master, even though local has both branches. So to push this, we can use git push just like before, and we're still going to origin, which is the GitHub repository, but now we're going to this new branch, which is fix my func. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And once that's done running, we'll see now that on GitHub we have this new branch. Here it is. There it is. And we can click on it to view it. We'll see that in this new branch we have this fix. But if we switch to the master branch, we won't have that fix yet. See? So now we have these 2 separate branches, and let's say we're ready to merge them now. So we'll see on GitHub there's actually a little prompt that tells us to pull request. So that's how you merge. So I'm going to go ahead and make one of those. And we can put some description here. So let's say we fixed my func. And now you can create the pull request. And notice this part up here is important. So we're merging into master from this branch. And on this little pull request screen, we'll see we're in this tab. We can see the new commits that we'd add. So this is a new commit we would add, and the files that we've changed. Here, let me maximize this. So once we're happy with the changes, we can merge. So here's merge. And this will actually create a new commit. So this is a merge commit. So we're going to merge. And now what we'll see if we go back to the code tab is that our master branch now has these changes. We'll notice also that the master branch has an extra commit. So here, this is this merge commit. And of course, now our repository here is out of date. So if we look at branch, let's go ahead and go to master so we can check out master. And now we're on master. And if we git log, we'll see that we don't have all 7 commits that are on GitHub. So just like before, we can git pull origin master. And now you can see that these commits are now up to date. And to get out of this log screen, you can just press Q. All right. So now we can see branches. We can merge them. And the idea here is that if you and we can practice this separately. If you see an error in someone else's repository, you can fork that repository by clicking this button right here, and that'll make a copy of the repository on your own account. And then you make a change in a branch and submit a pull request. And this is a common way that you fix other people's code in other repositories. So that's it.